Imagine your own son letting his wife's family paint you as a monster in the newspaper. That was me. But when Christmas came, I turned their perfect dinner into their public execution. If you've ever known the sting of being used, the burn of betrayal by your own flesh and blood, then you're going to want to hear this to the very end. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because this is not just revenge, this is vindication carved in stone. My name is Victor Ramirez, and for most of my 62 years I thought family was everything. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I built my life there brick by brick, literally. I worked as a mason, a trade my father had taught me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it fed my wife Lucia and our only son, Daniel. When Lucia passed away after a short illness, I poured every ounce of my love into raising Daniel. I made sacrifices, quiet ones, the kind nobody notices. New boots for him, second-hand shoes for me, vacations he could remember, overtime shifts I'd never get back. And when Daniel grew older, when he fell in love with Vanessa Cortez, I wanted to give him everything I never had. Vanessa came from a wealthy family, the Cortezes. Her father Gregory had made his money in real estate. Her mother Elaine was the queen of Portland's charity galas. They carried themselves like royalty, and they looked at me like a man sweeping the floors of their palace. But Daniel loved her, and that was enough for me. So when they needed help buying their first home, I wrote the check. When the mortgage payments stacked up higher than they expected, I paid them. Family trips, I covered those too. By the time I stopped to breathe, I had given them nearly $250,000. You'd think that kind of help would earn respect. Gratitude, maybe. Instead, it fed their entitlement. Vanessa and her parents began to treat me less like family and more like an ATM. And slowly, painfully, my son began to drift into their world. He stopped calling as much. Holidays became optional. Decisions about his own life, his own future, were made with the Cortezes, not with me. And all the while I smiled, swallowed my pride, and kept the money flowing, telling myself this was what family did. But family doesn't sneer behind your back. Family doesn't mock where you come from, or the color of your hands from years of work. And one Christmas, I found out just how deep their betrayal ran. It was a week before Christmas, when the cracks finally split wide open. I was in my small kitchen, brewing coffee, the way I always did, 2 scoops, a little cinnamon, the way Lucia used to make it, when the phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice carried that clipped, uneasy tone I'd learned to recognize. He only spoke that way when he wanted something. "Dad," he said, "about the mortgage this month." I closed my eyes, rubbing at the bridge of my nose. I already knew what was coming. "Daniel," I answered softly, "I can't keep covering it. I've stretched myself thin as it is. It's time you and Vanessa take this on yourselves." There was silence. Then a sharp inhale, and Vanessa's voice cut in from the background, shrill, piercing. "Are you serious, Victor? You're just going to abandon us? Abandon your own family?" I didn't answer right away. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and heavy. Finally, I said, "I'm not abandoning anyone. I've given you 2 more than most parents could ever dream of giving. But I can't keep doing this. It has to stop." The line went dead a moment later. No goodbye, no thank you, nothing, just silence. That was the beginning of the storm. Within days, Gregory and Elaine called me directly. Their words dripped with venom, masked as politeness. Gregory told me I was being spiteful. Elaine accused me of withholding money as a form of control. And then came the dagger I never saw coming. One morning, a neighbor knocked on my door with a folded newspaper in his hand. "Victor," he said, his voice tight, "you should probably see this." I unfolded it, and there, splashed across the community section, was an article. A smiling photo of Daniel and Vanessa, holding their toddler, standing on the porch of the house I had paid for. The headline read, "Local couple struggles as father refuses support despite comfortable means." The article painted me as some miserly old man who sat on piles of money while his struggling family went without. It called me controlling, manipulative, the kind of parent who used his wallet as a leash. Every word was a lie, and yet it was printed in black and white for the entire city to read. I remember my hands trembling as I set the paper down. My heart pounded, but not from anger, at least not at first. It was hurt, the kind of hurt that goes deeper than bone. My own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, had stood by while his wife and her family dragged my name through the mud. For a moment I thought about calling Daniel, demanding an explanation, but what was left to say? The damage was done in print. That night I sat alone in my living room, staring at Lucia's old photograph on the mantel. Her soft smile looked back at me, almost as if she could see the shame I felt. I whispered to her, "I tried, Kariko. I tried to keep us together." But somewhere in the hollow silence of that night, something hardened in me. A realization. These people, Vanessa, her parents, even Daniel, didn't see me as family. I was a resource, a wallet, a stepping stone to the life they wanted. And once I stopped being useful, they were willing to crush me without a second thought. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. Instead, I began to prepare, quietly, methodically. I gathered bank statements, copies of checks. Every receipt from every trip, every mortgage payment, every dollar I had ever handed them. I kept them all in a worn leather briefcase. I wasn't planning revenge in the fiery sense. I was planning truth. Cold, undeniable truth. And when Christmas came again, and the Cortezes sent me an invitation to dinner, pretending like nothing had happened, I knew exactly what I had to do. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope, embossed with gold lettering. "Join us for Christmas dinner, the Cortez family." They couldn't risk looking divided in front of their social circle. Appearances were everything to the Cortezes. I almost laughed. After everything, they thought I would sit at their table, smile, and pretend. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was my chance. Not for vengeance in the petty sense. For something far cleaner, something final. So on Christmas evening, I put on my best suit. Not flashy, just the dark gray one Lucia had always said made me look dignified. I polished my shoes until they reflected the light, tucked my leather briefcase under my arm, and drove to the Cortez estate. Their house was just as pretentious as I remembered, grand pillars at the front, lights strung across the roofline like a palace on parade. Cars lined the street, BMWs, Autos, sleek black sedans. I parked my old pickup a block away and walked the rest of the distance. Inside, the house buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. The Cortezes had invited half their social circle, people who already whispered in Portland about who was moving up and who was falling out of favor. Vanessa greeted me at the door with that smile, tight, polished, fake as glass. "Victor," she said, her voice dripping sugar, "I'm glad you could join us." I nodded, stepped inside, and let my eyes sweep the room. Gregory stood near the fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch, like he owned the air around him. Elaine fluttered from guest to guest, radiant in her silk dress. Daniel, my son, looked smaller somehow, despite the fine suit he wore. His eyes met mine briefly, then flicked away. We sat at a long mahogany table, candles burning, plates of prime rib and wine glasses shining. The conversation was polite, rehearsed. People complimented Elaine's decorations, Gregory's career, Vanessa's grace. My presence was barely acknowledged, until Gregory raised his glass. "We're so blessed to be surrounded by friends," he said loudly, "especially after such a difficult year. Family can be Complicated, can't it? His eyes flicked to me, a smirk playing on his lips. A ripple of knowing chuckles followed. That was my cue. I set my fork down, reached for the briefcase at my side, and placed it gently on the table. The room quieted, curiosity flickering in every face. With a calmness I didn't even know I possessed, I clicked it open. Inside were neat stacks of papers, organized, clipped, dated. I pulled out the first bundle. "Since we're discussing family," I said, my voice steady, "let's talk about what family has meant for me these past few years." I laid down copies of mortgage checks month after month, written in my hand. Then came receipts from vacations, plane tickets, hotel invoices, all with my credit card, bank transfers totaling thousands. Gasps rippled around the table as I stacked document after document, the pile growing higher, more damning. "In the past 5 years," I continued, "I've given Daniel and Vanessa nearly $250,000. Enough to buy this house twice over. Enough to send 3 kids to college. Enough to give anyone a start in life." Murmurs spread among the guests. Faces turned toward the Cortezes, expectant, skeptical. "And in return?" I said. My eyes locked on Gregory, then on Elaine, then finally on Vanessa. In return, I was called controlling, manipulative, a miser. I was slandered in a newspaper article by my own family. Vanessa's face flushed crimson. "This is a family matter," she hissed, trying to smile through her teeth at the guests. "We don't need to air private things here." I shook my head slowly. "No, you made it public the moment you printed lies about me. Tonight I'm simply correcting the record." The silence was suffocating. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others staring at the Cortezes with open disgust. Gregory's smirk was gone, replaced by a stiff jaw and darting eyes. Elaine's hand trembled as she set down her wineglass. I leaned back, collected, my voice soft but cutting through the air. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for." Then I stood, closed the briefcase, and walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices rose, accusations flew. Vanessa's sharp cry, Elaine's frantic protests, Gregory's bark of anger, it all blended into a storm that no longer concerned me. I stepped into the cool night air, inhaled deeply, and for the first time in years, I felt free. 3 months later, I opened my mailbox to find a certified letter addressed to Daniel and Vanessa. Out of habit, I glanced at it before forwarding it along. The bold black print across the top read, "Notice of default." The house, the one I'd helped them buy, the one I'd carried on my back for years, was slipping through their fingers. They'd missed 3 months of mortgage payments. The debt had piled up, $9,200 overdue, and because I'd been the guarantor on their loan, the bank still sent copies of every notice to my address. I sat on my porch and read it twice. Not with anger, not with glee, with nothing at all. Because by then I had detached myself from their chaos. It was no longer my burden. The calls started soon after. First, Vanessa. Her voice, shrill and venomous, poured into my voicemail. "You can't do this to us, Victor. You're ruining our lives. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Then Gregory and Elaine. Their tone was smoother, more desperate. "Victor, we're family. Surely you don't want Daniel's child to grow up homeless. You've always been generous. Don't let bitterness change you now." I didn't answer. Finally, one evening, a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. But not the Daniel I remembered, the confident young man with Vanessa on his arm, playing prince in the Cortez kingdom. This Daniel looked broken, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red. His suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair unkempt. He swallowed hard. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm sorry." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd taught him to stack blocks when he was a boy, the same one where Lucia once set out birthday cakes. He kept his head down, unable to meet my eyes. I let them control me, he admitted. I let them talk me into the article, into everything. I should have defended you. I should have been your son instead of their puppet. I said nothing, just let him spill the words he had swallowed for years. He told me about the foreclosure, about Vanessa's anger, about how the Cortezes' friends had turned their backs after Christmas dinner. He told me he had lost everything: his house, his standing, even Vanessa's respect. Finally, he looked up, tears streaking his face. I need your forgiveness, Dad. I leaned back, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was still my boy. On the other, the wounds he'd allowed to fester cut deep. Daniel, I said quietly, do you know how much I've given you over the years? He shook his head. $280,000. His eyes widened. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I forgive you, I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean I open my wallet again. You're a grown man. You need to start acting like one. Get a job. Live within your means. Build your life with your own hands, not mine. He nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. And then, softly, he said something that caught me off guard. At Christmas, when you stood up to them, I was ashamed at first. But later, I realized I was proud of you. For once, you weren't just my dad, you were the strongest man in the room. I had no answer for that. I just placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the closest I could come to telling him I still loved him, despite everything. That night, after he left, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stepped onto the porch. The night air was crisp, the city lights flickering in the distance. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest had lifted. I wasn't alone anymore either. Over the past months, I had grown close to Elena Morales, a kind woman who knew nothing of the Cortezes' poisonous games. She and her family welcomed me without judgment, without expectation. When they invited me to dinner, it wasn't because of what I could pay. It was because they wanted me there. Sitting on that porch, I realized something Lucia had probably known all along. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by respect, love, and the simple truth that the people who truly want you in their lives don't demand payment for your place at the table. And as I sipped that whiskey, listening to the quiet hum of the city, I knew I was finally free. In the end, my revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was truth. It was dignity. It was showing them that the man they thought they could exploit had a backbone stronger than they'd ever imagined. And once I reclaimed my respect, they lost everything. If you've ever been taken for granted, you know how satisfying it feels when the tables finally turn. What's the most powerful act of justice you've ever seen? Share it in the comments. I'd love to read your stories. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales where karma isn't just real, it's unstoppable.